Very good. Okay, so I'm going to talk about maintaining an open source project without burning out. And I am Natanael Copa. I am the founder of Alpine Linux, the Linux distribution. Maybe you have heard about it, maybe you have used it.
I made it for a while.
Sorry?
I used it for a while on the laptop.
And it was a really bad distro, so you had to change it. That's good. I also work for Mirantis as a contractor with K0's Kubernetes distro. So if you have been to Kubernetes, that's also what I'm doing. It's also open source project. I think Mirantis is doing pretty well when it comes to open source nowadays. And I have been contributing to open source since 2001. That's a lot. Some years. Now you wonder how old I am. I am only 19. Yeah, and this talk I will talk about my experiences from Alpine Linux. So I started Alpine Linux for around, I think it's 20 years now when I started. And I'm still here, so I have not yet burned out. But I have to admit, sometimes I do get tired, very tired. And how many of you are open source maintainers? I might ask. We have a few open source maintainers. Thank you for the good work you do. It's appreciated. And you have maybe seen this thing here. So even if you are not an open source maintainer, you are probably a consumer of open source. I think everyone is. Maybe every person on this planet is using open source one way or the other. And the maintainers are doing the heavy load. Thank you for that, Chalmers. That. Yeah, I want this window to pop up. Stop popping out. Here we go. Problem solved. You don't see it anymore.
That's how you strike an issue.
All right. So. If you're an open source maintainer and maybe you start out with a small project, you only want to use it yourself and you want to make it public for someone else to use it, and you share it on the internet with the world and you start getting users and it piles on, and after 20 years you are in the position there and you started to get bug reports. You have to deal with the community, and some people are not very nice people in the community. You have to deal with that, and you get tired. And how you manage to deal with this? Maybe you didn't want to end up there, and now you are there. So how do you deal with this? This is what I'm going to talk about in this talk here. And I will share my experiences, the things I've learned over the past 20 years when maintaining Alpine Linux. Has been useful for me, and hopefully it will be useful for you as well if you are a maintainer, or it will also give you an insight what maintainers experience. So maybe we as a community can do better at taking care of the open source maintainers, because if open source maintainer burns out, it will actually affect you as well in the end. So, this is what I'm going to talk about here. 4 main points. Don't be the only one, and make it easy to contribute to your open source project. Build a supportive and friendly community, and learn how to set boundaries. That are like the main points I will talk about here. So if we start with the first one, don't be the only one. Make yourself replaceable so that the project is sustainable, basically. And we have probably heard about the bus factor. What happens if you get hit by a bus? What will happen with your open source project? Will it survive? Will it collapse? And this was a question I asked myself very early when I started with Alpine Linux. From the very beginning, I was thinking, what happens? I get hit by a bus. And some people think, well, if I die, who cares? It doesn't matter, does it? What happens with the rest? But it will affect your family if you die. And you probably don't want your wife, your family, your closest ones to get phone calls, hey, can you help us with the domain name? Can you help us with this and this? Because they already deal with a lot of stress, hopefully. So that's why this matters. But in real life, when you're talking about getting hit by a bus, we are talking about maybe unexpected events. Maybe you unexpectedly become a parent, need to deal with different things. Maybe you lose your job. There are other changes that may be expected or unexpected. So it's a good question to think about, even if you think that maybe it doesn't matter that much if you die, but it actually matters. So I was thinking of this question earlier, and I tried to always make sure that there was a second person, at least one more person that has access to all the critical components in the infrastructure for a project. There is always another person that can access the domain name. So if I forget to pay, if I disappear, I know that someone can take care of it. I have seen other projects. There was an incident some years ago with, I think it was Void Linux. I don't know if you remember that. The lead developer disappeared, and it was a huge crisis. What do we do now? So it's good to think about that before it happens. Start to think about that early. And as a consequence of that, if you make sure that there is other people, you are not the only one, the consequence is that you can take vacation. You can go on vacation for 3 weeks and you can just forget about your project. And that is gold worth. Being able to take real vacation is gold worth. So always make sure that you're not the only one. And the second thing when it comes to not being the only one is avoid being the bottleneck. It was when I started at my Linux, I was like the dictator. And that's very nice, you know, you have full control of everything and you deal with it until you become the bottleneck. And it maybe not only just reviewing patches and merging things, but also making decisions. There are a lot of people who want to contribute, and they say, hey, I want to contribute, but which direction are we going? How you want to do it this way or this way? And people ask, how do we documentation? I can help with that, but how do we do it? And at some point, I became the bottleneck. And that's not a nice place to be honest, because everything depends on me, and I need to deal with a lot of things, and that is tiresome. So at some point, I realized I have to reorg how the Alpine Linux organization worked. And we create the council, so now we are 3 people in the council. Basically what you need to do, you need a constitution. How are decisions made? Who makes the decisions? How do you get involved in making decisions? How do you kick out people for making decisions? There are many questions around that. You need a constitution, a way to organize all this. But you need to do it if you want to survive in the long run. At least I had to do it. That said, I think in the Alpine Linux community, it's not perfect, but at least I'm not alone, and that gives a relief for me. but I have to admit it's scary to give up control, because that's what you're doing. You used to have all control, and suddenly you have to give up some of that control to someone else. And what happens if the majority disagrees with you and decide to kick you out? And it's scary, but it's worth it. The point here is, don't be the only one, don't be the bottleneck, and make sure that you share the load with others. And the second point I wanted to talk about, what has helped me to not burn out in this, is make it easy to contribute. You want to, well, to be honest, when I started with Alpine Linux, I really did not want to build a distro. I had use for a router, VPN stuff, and it needed to be small and things like that. So I used Gen 2 to build things, because you can compile things the way you wanted, and I used that. And then I needed binary packages from that. And Gen 2 is source-based, so I had some make files to create the binaries, and then I had my overlay from the upstream, and suddenly I had 3 sets of build scripts, and it was a pain to maintain. But the major problem was that I was the only one in the world who could set up the building environment. There was no one else. It was really difficult for people to contribute, even if they wanted. So at some point, we just changed it and created a distro. And the build script format, APK build, I don't know if you have seen those. If you have seen, they are relatively simple, and they are simple by design. They are designed so you should be able to read the script, and you should immediately understand what is going on. And that's a feature. Gen 2 has a lot of fancy E-classes and things, but debugging it, you have to dig around, and I want to avoid that. It should be easy to understand what's going on, easy to contribute. And I think that is, we now might have succeeded fairly well with that, because from the feedback I get, it is easy to build your own packages there. Also, when it comes to reporting patches, we use email-based workflow. In the early days, I like the way kernel does it. You send an email patch, and then you need to manage that somehow, so we use patchwork. But what happened was that email is complicated. Setting up the email client is complicated, and if you use Gmail, they started to mangle the patches. It was, it was really complicated for people to contribute. So we moved over to GitLab. People were used to GitHub. It's like similar workflow. And that was, I would say, a huge success, because it was so much easier for people to contribute back. It also gave us CI, which was like extremely welcome. It's extremely useful. I don't know how we ever managed without the CI nowadays. The point is, make it easy to contribute. That also involves documentation, and I think in Alpine that's something we can improve, have better documentation. But for example, when it comes to coding style, how do you write your commit messages instead of commenting or telling people over and over again, hey, you need to format the commit message in this way, write it in documentation and point them to the documentation, then that problem solves itself, more or less. But when it's easy to contribute, it will actually help you a lot yourself. So that's one important thing, I think. Yeah, I think I'll move on. Yeah, I also had a point there about delegating responsibility. People want to contribute, they want to help, and after they have contributed a while, they can also help you with reviewing patches and things like that. Okay, and the third main point I think here is about building a supportive community and friendly community, and I think this is super important. The community should be friendly, and that is a goal I have in Alpine Linux, must be friendly. And to achieve that, we need a code of conduct. In the beginning, we didn't have a code of conduct in Alpine Linux, and I personally thought, common sense. It's how you behave. You need to be a nice guy. That's common sense. And also because I like coding, I don't really like hitting with community things and managing things. I want to spend my time with coding. Code of conduct, licenses is boring. But it is really important to have a code of conduct. Of course, because we didn't have code of conduct, and because we are dealing with many people, there were conflicts showing up, and people starting to say nasty things to each other and disagreements, and I said, come on guys, you need to behave. And I spent hours and hours on phone calls with people to try to help them to behave. But at some point I realized that some people think it's a feature, that it's an unfriendly community. Like philosophy of elitism. If you have harsh community, you can kick out all the low quality people and you end up with the best one at the top and only the best one, and that will actually give you better Linux distribution. And I was like, wow, people actually think that? And then I realized that we need a code of conduct. Problem is, when there is conflicts going on, there are a lot of drama going on, and say, hey, we need a code of conduct, people get scared. I'm gonna kick out. So that, how do you deal with that? So point here is have a code of conduct early before the problems come up, because it will help you. There are a lot of different code of conducts out there, and you can grab one. Doesn't matter that much which one you use, but have one from the beginning and do it early before the problems come. It will reduce a lot of stress for you. It's much easier to say, hey, this is how we behave here. If you don't want to do that, that's fine, but then you please go somewhere else, basically. So have a code of conduct. And in Alpine Linux, we want a friendly community, and I would actually say that it is a security feature. And the reason why I think that is when there are scammers or people who want to infiltrate, like the XZ incident that happened. If you see what actually happened there, it was a maintainer who was tired. I don't know if he was burned out or what happened, but he was burned out. And then people getting angry, unfriendly, and trying to push in things. So I think whenever I see someone trying unfriendly way of pushing things, it's a red flag. Maybe this is a scam. Maybe this is someone trying to attack you, because that is what they do. So then stop. Okay, that we need to be friendly. It will actually improve the security. It's what I think. And also because open source is volunteers, you don't pay the people. So if you want to have any contribution at all, if you actually want volunteers to help you, you need to make it fun to contribute. And if it's unfriendly, it's not fun. You can motivate people by giving them bad conscience and things like that. Hey, and that might work, that might give results, but in the long run, it will not. People will burn out, and you don't want to burn out your contributors. You want them to stay there for a long time. And being friendly, making it fun, helps with that. Otherwise, people will go away. I also have, focus on the positive things. In open source, you deal with a lot of things, some good things and some not so good things. You might deal with toxic behavior, complaints, and bugs, and stressful things. Personally, I tend to be very stressed when there is a release coming up, and now in May we will have a release. This is a stressful time for me. But there are also, well, negative things. I've even gotten death threats, you know, and you have to deal with that. If you do open source, you may have to deal with that. But there is also a lot of positive things going on. And I think, forget about the negative things you experience in open source. Concentrate on the good experiences you have. We have a lot of fun together in the community. Focus on the positive experiences. For example, as I mentioned, I tend to be stressed when our releases, and then someone sent me a PayPal, small donation. Hope this is enough for a good wine. And that's so nice, you know. You get touched by it, and it means a lot. And those small things that people do to you that mean a lot, concentrate on that, and remember those, take care of those. I have this citation here, perfect is the enemy of good. I think this is sort of difficult to find out. Find out where is good enough. You want the end product to be high quality, you want it to be good. And when you do reviewing of patches and merge requests, when do you say this is good enough? Does it have to be perfect? If you always want it to be perfect, then you will have a problem. You will burn out, because you will never achieve that. It's not realistic. And I also, in open source, deal with many different other open source projects, and you read the code when you're debugging, and wow, this is really ugly code. And so many times I have been tempted to rewrite out of the codes, but you have to realize you cannot rewrite everything. You cannot do that. So you have to settle, okay, this is good enough, does the job, and accept that. Otherwise, you will get a problem. So, the last main point I want to discuss is setting boundaries when it comes to not getting burned out. You have to realize you cannot do everything, and you shouldn't try to do everything. And there you have to define the scope of the project, define what is the project, what does it do, what is it supposed to do, and maybe even more important, what does it not do, where are the limits? Because you can take Alpine Linux as a distribution. Maybe someone wants to make a desktop distribution. Oh, let's support glibc, maybe we want to support different image systems and things like that. You have to define what are the scope, what are the limits. We will do this, but we will not do that. If you have that clearly defined, it will help you to say no to things. And that is an important thing. Learn when to say no. You maybe you want to help, but should you do it? You have to find out when it's wise to say no. If you don't do that, you will burn out. That's for sure. And I think it's interesting because I have been doing Alpine Linux for now 20 years, but I also work with the K0 distribution, a Kubernetes distro, which is open source also, and in that team I can see my co-workers. They are much more like supportive when they get questions and feature requests that I personally think is way out of scope. They say, yeah, we want to help and we want to give support for things helping the users, to be nice with them, and I say like, no, just because we give free software does not mean we give free support. So that's their problem. We have to say no here. I suppose that's from my feelings when I deal with that. But I think it's a good thing. Find out when to say no and actually learn how to do it in a nice way. And sometimes people come and complain and say, hey, in Debian we have this and fixing security, things, blah, blah, blah. And I say, okay, no, if that's what you need, okay, use Debian then. Go ahead and use that instead. And say, no, we will not help you with this. And when it comes to setting boundaries, I also said learn to take breaks. Sometimes you get tired, and I get tired, everybody gets tired sometimes, and then it's okay to take a break. And sometimes you have to do it, but it's good if you take a break before you have to do it, because then maybe it comes in an inconvenient time. So plan ahead, take a break, take vacation, and when you do have vacation, please don't bring your laptop on your vacation. Take a real vacation, and that is also a way to say no. I don't respond to anything when I'm on vacation. So I think that's a good thing to do when setting boundaries. Yeah, that was actually what I had on my book here. So if we recap, make sure you're not the only one when it comes to infrastructure, domain names and things. Don't be the bottleneck. Make it easy for you to contribute to your open source project. Build a supportive community, and learn how to set the boundaries. This is not a complete list. This is not all the answers. I don't claim I have all the answers when it comes to maintaining open source project without burning out. But at least these are some of the points that has helped me be here. And that was it. I'm going to questions.
This is not a real question. I just want to say thank you for all the work. Alpine is wonderful.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. If you don't have questions, I have questions for you. We have a question there.
Well, I guess people that are not contributors sometimes were scared about, okay, yeah, how much extra effort it takes, how much of your free time, like, for example, for you, is everything just part of your daily job, or do you also use part of your free time to manage, yeah, to be a maintainer of the reports, and yeah, how do you balance that time as well?
Excellent question. That is actually a very good question, and I was wondering if someone would ask about that, because as you maybe have noticed, I haven't mentioned anything about funding in this here. In my case, I have only worked with this on my work time with open source. I consider myself lucky. I know not everybody can do that. I used to work for a non-profit organization where Alpine started, And then Docker hired me, and they let me more or less use all my time working on Alpine. Now I work for Mirantis, and they say I can use part of the time for Alpine. Without that, I would not be able to do it, to be honest. So if you can get funding of some sort, you can do it on your professional time. That's absolutely to be preferred. And if you don't, take care of yourself. Is my advice. I would even say that it's not worth it if you feel like you are too tired to do it. I have to do it on my time. I would recommend doing that, to be honest. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Thank you.
I'm going to ask you the really hard question. What if you get hit by the bus? I mean, in this context, what if you actually have burned out? What advice can you give to people in that situation to get out of that dark well that keeps you going down if you stay there?
And so if I get hit by a bus, I cannot do anything. so you have to do that beforehand. That's the point here. I don't know.
What if you didn't?
If I didn't,
Yeah, what can you do then? Do you have you any suggestions or an advice to give?
I'm not sure I understood the question here.
What if you didn't prepare for being hit by the bus or for burning out in this context? What advice could you give to somebody that for whose maybe it's too late to follow your advice that you have given now, but maybe not late enough to do something else if you have any ideas?
Well, if you do get hit by a bus and you haven't prepared for it, then it's too late. You know, then there's not much you can do about it. So I don't know what. Yeah. Well, if you haven't prepared for it, then you have to make sure you don't get hit by a bus. Well, question there.
The question was, if you're in an emergency where you're a maintainer and get hit by a bus, what should the other people around this project do?
Or what the other
Maybe
people-
that was the question.
Yeah, was that the question? What other people should do if someone gets hit by a bus? I'm a little bit confused now, sorry.
Yeah, thanks for the talk. I get the feeling that what you're describing here is, in a commercial context, we talk about work-life balance, but you're kind of talking about work-hobby balance, and where the problem where something you do because you like it, you want to make something you're proud of, you have some motivation to give or whatever, and you move that into the sphere of work, daytime thing. Now, how do you take a break from your hobby? And how do you handle that situation? What you described sounds like an ideal situation, but I'm also a little bit afraid that if we do get funding, then it kind of kills an outlet, something that we do for fun for a moment, and turn that into work, which means we need to fill a space with something else. I don't know. How do you handle that?
So in my case, since I do it on my work time, I spend my free time on other things. I don't spend it on. I try to avoid spending it with computers. Well, in my early days, I actually did hack a lot on the night when I was younger. I try to avoid it, basically. So, but that's in my case. If you do it as a hobby, and then you have a problem when we have this slide with the dependency from XKCD. Basically, that is actually a problem. So should avoid that, I think.
It's a little bit related, but I'm just curious. Were you a maintainer for Alpine before you started working, like on your only as your daytime job?
So I started Alpine.
Oh.
So I started the project. So I guess I was maintainer.
Never mind.
All right. I actually have a question for you. Because I know I don't have all the answers, and I suspect you guys probably know more than me on those things. What do you think you need to do to avoid getting burned out when you're dealing with open source? What do you do? Or do you never get tired? How do you cope with it?
When people hear that I do something with computers, they ask me, "Oh, so you're a gamer?" And my answer is no. I don't do computer gaming at all, but board games instead. So an analog way of relaxing.
Yeah.
So I don't do a lot of coding, but I'm more on the community side of things in my open source communities. And I've figured out there are at least two phenomena that helps me going. One is the realization that when we work on something that we care about together over time and meet each other and get to know each other, that's fertile ground for creating friendships. And that's something I think the open source community has a really good opportunity to play on. Just making friends by working on things you care about together. But sometimes you need a break. And for me, the most useful thing is to have something that is called the third place. Like home is the first place, work is the second place, and then you have the third place that is not work or not home, where you can do your own thing, your own projects, take a break from everything, talk with friends. And it might be a local hackerspace, it might be a sports club where you're playing football or whatever, that you can take a complete break. It could be a hobby, but it's always useful to do it with somebody else that is outside. So for me, those two things make it a little more nicer, and let's keep me going on this.
Thank you. Very good point. Thanks for sharing.
Well, for me, I would say one of the points we had with set boundaries. I try to set that I will never go after 11 in the evenings because I can get stuck until 2 in the morning and then I have to get up or stuff like that. So set boundaries is really important. And also remember that you are volunteering. Sometimes it feels like a job. Oh, I need to fix this because they are so angry with me, and then just realize, oh, I don't have to. If they're angry, they can fix it or wait, and also know when to exit. Sometimes in some projects it just gets too without the code of conduct, it gets too toxic, and just know when to walk away. Sometimes.
Amen. Very, very, very. I totally agree with that. Thank you.
I would say prioritize. So, because not everything is as important, take breaks. And I'm not going to lie, if your project, like the Gentoo project, has a very toxic human resource policy, let them kick you out and move to something else.
Yeah.
I look at our GitHub stars. I plot how they grow over time and where in the world are people that star us. And then I Google us and see, wow, we're used there and there and there, and it's super amazing. So focus on the positive, as you said.
Yeah, that's what I meant with that. Thank you.
Yeah, so one thing that's helped me is that, for example, I'm involved in the Media Wiki project, which is, it's a massive code base, so one thing that's helped me is that once in a while when I get bored of something, I just want to work something completely different. It's like such a massive project, you can have so many specializations and you can learn about things that you haven't ever worked with before, with just by changing a bit the area where you're working.
Thank you. Yeah.
optimizing to make me walk as much.
Thank you. I think I found it pretty useful recently, like especially when you're in some thread and a heated discussion, right? When you want to reply, write a draft, but don't send it. Like wait 2 hours, better night, reread it. Last time I was involved in such, I adapted my draft 3 times. So like it was the first version was like then I didn't send it. I made it less critical and less, and I eventually on the third try it was like really objective and like impassionate, I guess, which really helped, I think.
Yeah, thank you. Good advice. I have tried to do that as well sometimes, but my problem is if I don't send it immediately, I will never send it.
Maybe that's good.
Exactly. Maybe that's a good thing.
That's why you write and don't send, so like you see it in the draft.
Ah, okay.
And then like, oh, should I send that?
Yeah, but that's a good point. Thank you.
I'm just not going to talk as a producer or maintainer, I'm just going to be as a consumer or a guy that uses a lot of open source. So when you put the bugs and stuff, try to be helpful, try to be thankful, try to understand there's people that are spending time there. Be positive.
And I must say, actually, most of the experience I have in Alpine, vast majority is like that. They are very friendly. They are very helpful, understanding, they understand, we do it for free, people they don't pay. So it's very few that are like toxic, it happens. But the problem is that the few ones has a tendency to destroy for everyone else. So focus on the positive thing. Have you other positive experiences with open source in general that you think like, wow, this is really nice? We have heard some examples here. Are there other positive experiences you have had when you have maintaining things or used open source?
I have contributed some packages to Geek system, and a lot of things point out, it has to be easy to contribute to. It's not really easy to do it for Geeks because of the email stuff. My email client also is not nice, but somehow finally managed to cross that first barrier and actually getting a positive response is probably one of the biggest things that changed everything.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, one thing, because some orange, I'm not able to code or make those kind of commits, so sometimes I'll just do something simple like find a typo in the documentation and sending one in for Adore, the recording software. And I get a personal response from someone saying, oh, thank you very much for that, and it was really helpful. It was such a small thing to do, but that makes me really positive about it. And next time I find something, I will definitely find it. In the difference that if you had more hostile or no reply, then I don't know, it wasn't worth it. Why would I do that?
Yeah.
As you said, friendly community.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing that up. I was actually thinking of that when I prepared to talk here. A small thank you can mean so much for a stressed maintainer. It doesn't cost much to say thank you. It does not cost that much to be friendly with others and patient with others. But on the other end, it can mean so much. So it's actually worth it. Cost benefit there is enormous.
I suppose this isn't really related to open source, but I come from the world of teaching, and there's a lot of talk about the 80-20 principle, where like the 80% of the issues come from 20% of the people, and stuff like that. So I suppose the code of conduct can let you crack down on that early on and stuff like
Yeah. Thank you. Is there anything that you think we as a community can do better in general?
There's one that I've been concerned about ever since the XZ incident last year, and it's taking care of the social aspect. Realize that we're not just contributors, we're not just code pushers, but we're people as well. And try to connect with each other at that level as well, at a human level. Try to make friends, or at least, you know, have a conversation. How are you? Are you doing good? Good. Things like that. Take care of each other, basically. Yeah, on a human level.
Yeah. Thank you. I agree with that, and that's actually something I try to do and encourage in that Linux community. Sometimes you notice that contributors are tired, or maybe they say that, hey, something happens with the family. Oh, prioritize the family. That's important. We will take care of Alpine for you. Don't worry about that. So taking care of each other, I think, is super, super important.
Sometimes I have read some documentation which linked to some forum post. And in the forum post there was a question, then the OP got replied. The answer is, but next time please read the documentation.
Yeah. I think it's good to just point to the documentation when you reply saying that this is what.
But the forum post was linked from documentation.
Okay.
So it seems like the answer was not in the documentation beforehand, even though the OP got replied, please read the documentation. So you see the loophole?
Yeah, it's circular. Read the documentation, read the forum. Yeah. In Alpine, we actually need help with documentation. I think that there is a lot of room for improvement with the documentation. I am not good at writing documentation. We delegate someone who can take the lead there, basically. All right.
Okay, it looks like I get almost the final question. It's more of a point, actually, of possible interest, and I'm not entirely sure I should say this. There's a project now of creating a type of metadata file that people can drop into their projects on GitHub or wherever to describe what kind of needs a project has. Not what they provide, but what they would like to have help with. To create a specification for that. This file work is done under the CycloneDX SBOM standard that OWASP is working on for the next version. And if all goes well, we'll be turning this into an ECMA standard in a few months. We'll see how that goes. So think about a file that could go along with the contribution of MD as a contribution of YAML or something like that, where you can spec out in a machine readable way what kind of expectations and needs you have. And that's, I think, something that could help open source projects just being able to communicate what they need, because people just don't know that, and the users don't know that there are needs out there. They have a role to play when they use open source projects. And not everybody can offer money because there's no budget for it, but maybe they can offer time in the form that the business has somebody with maybe some graphics or user interface or documentation skills, and they say that we can spend some hours on that and then create a better project that way. So this exists, and if anybody thinks this sounds good and want to help me, then just please reach out to me.
Sounds very useful. I like that.
Yeah, so I just had like a suggestion for what I think many people can improve, which would be celebrating achievements.
Yes.
In my experience, just even studying and in work, I often would prepare and work really hard for like an exam or a delivery, and then it would go well, and then I just drop it and I move on to the next thing. So I think it would be good if people took a moment, celebrated that it actually worked, that things went well, before moving on with the next problem. Because otherwise it's so focused on the things that don't work. Yeah.
I think that's a very good point. I appreciate that. Thank you. And I agree. I actually thought about that also when I prepared this. Celebrate your wins. It's a good point. Thank you. Thank you for bringing it up.
Just wanted to point that as important as celebrating achievements is also to take your time to recover from failures. It's one of those things you learn on academia.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Thank you very much for your comments and for listening, and thank you for maintaining open source, being part of the community, and thank you so much for being nice, a community member. And the positive feedback you give, it actually means a lot for us maintainers.
And thanks for coming here.
Thank you.